Welcome back to the channel. We are breaking down the Buffalo Bills entire draft today, all the draft picks, talking about them. And let's just get right into it. Their first pick was the 30th pick in the draft, and it was cornerback Maxwell Harrison out of Kentucky. And I was happy with this pick. They have a pressing need at corner since they didn't re-sign Rasul Douglas, opposite of Christian Benford. And they have a great slot corner in Teron Johnson, but definitely needed that other guy across from Benford, like I just said. And, I just think he's a great athlete and hopefully will end up being a solid player for him.
Yeah, and getting Tre'Davious White, I know he's at the end of his career, but between the three of these guys, dude, the Bills are back at corner. Um, did y'all get rid of Elam?
Yeah, to the Cowboys, he got
Yeah,
traded.
that's what I thought.
And with their general manager, Brandon Bean, once you've been there for this long, I think it's been 8 years now or something like that, you can kind of see trends in the way they draft and kind of how well they draft and what positions they go for. And this is their third first round corner selection. The first one was Tre'Davious White, and he was really good for a long time, so I would consider that a great pick. And then you had Kyer Elam, who clearly just was not the guy. Maybe hopefully he will be for the Cowboys, but it just didn't work out in Buffalo. And so it's kind of breaking a tie right here to see if he can pick the right guy again, like he did with Trey Day. And all these corners that he has picked, this is the 30th pick, and those two guys were in the 20s too. So he's proven that he can find that guy in the 30s, and I think Maxwell definitely could be. He ran like a 4.2, I think 8 or 9 in the
Yeah,
combine. So he clearly is a crazy athlete, and you know probably has the ability to match up with a bunch of guys in the league.
yeah, and I know for us, he shot up at the combine because he was one of the. I mean, Will Johnson didn't go, so we're all looking for the next best guy, right? Jade Barron, Maxwell Harrison came up fast with his 40 time. Um, Maybe the coaches knew about him already, but that's when I found out about him. But yeah, you're right. I think they keep drafting corner in the first, but dude, I like this dude. And I know you mentioned it after the draft with me. You liked how he was dapping up every guy that got picked before him. He was just being a like he seems like a cool guy and a good locker room guy too. But Seamus, we've got the PFF grades pulled up here for Maxwell Harrison, and from off the rip, we can tell he missed time, but
Yeah,
you could see flashes here.
yeah, it does look like he missed some time there. And another interesting thing, real quick, that I saw is that all of his teammates at Kentucky saw him get drafted, and they were all like fired up for him. There's a video that came out, so definitely seems like a dude that is gonna be able to fit in well in the locker room. But um, yeah, I mean, obviously, you're not looking for this dude to be a run defender. It obviously helps if he's able to tackle, but he's kind of a smaller corner, so there probably will be struggles tackling, at least early on. But, he had one bad game against South Carolina in coverage. Other than that, a couple bad games, one really good one, but you're playing Ohio. Um, and overall, though, I think he'll hopefully be able to translate well because Sean McDermott's a defensive coach and always seems to produce good defenses. So it feels like this pick and a lot of the next coming picks, which are all defensive guys, are definitely uh, because of what happened against the Chiefs and what continues to happen against the Chiefs. And I like it, honestly. I think we needed to load up the defense more.
Yeah, I know we're getting into the picks here, but I do like the direction that the Bills went in with their draft, going all defense. It seems to be their strength next to Josh Allen, but they had they had a good amount of holes to fill on defense. Just Vaughn leaving. I know you know more about this more than me because obviously you're a Bills fan, but um, yeah. Sorry, I'm looking over here trying to pull up. The next draft pick for the
Y-
Buffalo Bills picked at 41.
Yeah, TJ Sanders out of South. One trend that I noticed just because of these first two picks, there was a ton of SEC and Big Ten players picked that were, kind of at the top of the draft. It felt like the top, I mean, I don't even know, definitely the first round, but second round too was just so many SEC and Big Ten players. And it feels like that has a lot to do with just the transfer portal because, if you're going off at a lower level, you're just going to transfer there, take the bag, and it makes sense. You're getting more exposure and all that. But um, yeah, the Bills traded up right here. They traded 2 seconds for this pick right here. It was pick 56 and 62 to move up to 41. So, you know, they definitely like the player a lot, giving that up, and they needed a lot of help on the interior. I would say a lot might be a stretch, but definitely a good amount of help because it's Ed Oliver and Daquan Jones, and then after that, you're kind of just signing guys, and it hasn't really been a consistent, other guy. So this is kind of trying to free up Ed Oliver a little bit, I think.
Yeah, and the grades aren't super crazy, but I think it's worth mentioning 6'4", 290. Um, a lot of times when we see picks past the first round, and some even in the first round, you see guys with the attributes you want or the 40 time you want, and you think that with your coaching, this guy can turn into a dog. I know there's another guy. I think he's coming up next. Yeah, that is a perfect example of that. But Seamus, here's the PFF grades. Uh, Nothing super crazy.
Yeah.
Looks pretty staggered to me, but consistent in tackling. Um, yeah,
Yeah, and they really just, like I mentioned, must have really liked this guy because I did think it was kind of a lot to trade to get up, to what, 15 spots. And, they
yeah,
did get like a third. I didn't, mention all the details of it, but it still was a pretty good haul. And that just makes me instantly think that he's going to have kind of an instant impact, or he probably will have an instant impact straight off the bat.
yeah. I agree, and I know I was just talking about um, guys being developed by coaches and coaches falling in love with attributes or 40 times and stuff like that. The next guy that y'all drafted, Seamus, is Landon Jackson at 72 in the third round. I think a lot of people were surprised to see him this far, but everyone's seen the clip of him in high school at a camp doing the pass rush drills. And then you see him at the combine and you see what coaching and what getting stronger and faster and all that does for you. But I'll let you dive into the analysis, Seamus.
Yeah, Uh, it's worth mentioning that the first 5 picks for the Bills, to be specific, were all defensive players, and you get an edge rusher right here. He's huge, 6'7", 280.
Yeah.
So, kind of a guy that you expect to come in here, and you can see by the PFF grades, kind of do well against the run too, not just a pass rusher. And honestly, like it looks like right here, a consistent run stopper and maybe even the best part of his game right off the bat. I think he'll be able to help right away. You brought in Joey Bosa, but it's only for a year. And other than Greg Rousseau, there's, you got AJ Epinesa. I love him too, but he's definitely been a more rotational guy for us. He's stepped it up the past couple of years, but, you know, just get this guy in the rotation. And that's the way the Bills play defense. They just rotate D linemen on the
Keep him
interior and on
fresh.
the edge. So, yeah. So just throw him in the rotation, and I think he'll just develop over time. And I could definitely see this dude being a starter for the Bills one day down the line, 100%.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned Joey Bosa, Seamus, on a 1 year deal as well. These young edge guys they drafted, they may not have a significant role off the rip, but Joey Bosa is a good guy to help mentor them and seeing 6'7" at Landon Jackson, bro. Isn't Greg Rousseau really tall?
Yeah, I think he's also 6'7".
Yeah, dude. I mean, how about that? On both edges, 6'7". All you gotta do is put your hands up. Got guys
I
like,
was gonna say there might be a lot of bat downs this year.
yeah. So I know that's kind of a random thing to consider, but um,
Yeah.
dude, I didn't know. I didn't realize that Landon Jackson was that tall.
Yeah,
But
and I really like, kinda how I mentioned, like, the trends of each general manager and head coach, if you've had this long of a marriage, if you will, is that they've developed a lot of edge rushers and even down the line, AJ Epinesa was a late second rounder, maybe a more of a mid-second rounder, but not that far off from where Landon Jackson is picked, and, that's just one example, but, I think you could see that again 100% and have a third rounder that is significantly, productive, which is huge.
yeah, I like his grades this last year at Arkansas. That's good numbers right there. Good run defense.
Yeah, yeah, and constant improvement too.
Yep, exactly.
Love to see that. All right, and in the fourth round, the Bills went with Deion Walker, and that was the 109th pick. You got a D tackle out of Kentucky, so you're pairing up two Kentucky guys right here. And like I mentioned about kind of trends, the trend of this, kind of draft, first four guys was SEC defenders, which, I've mentioned before, seem to have a high hit rate, especially in the past, 5 to 10 years. So I like it. I didn't really think that, this dude was going to be up this late, honestly. He's kind of someone that I feel like is pretty well known. And I don't know. I guess I just thought he'd be more of like a kind of late second to third rounder. Maybe I'm off on that. There's a reason that he's here, but dude, he's 6'6", 345.
Yeah,
That is
dude.
huge. Like,
Yeah.
man,
And when
talk
you watch
about
him,
deep defensive line. Uh,
yeah.
that's what the Bills did right here.
I don't know if this was just my analysis, but like he seems so like he looks weak, like top heavy, bro. I don't know. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. I've never seen someone built like him. Like obviously we've seen tall guys at 345, but like dude, he just looks
Yeah.
so he's not like the dude at Florida, Desmond Watson.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
He's not like
400
him, but
pounder. Holy
yeah,
shit.
but yeah. Um, I think he's got a lot of. We can look at the grades here in a sec, but I feel like he's got a lot of finesse at that size, though. Like I saw a lot of hand swiping watching his tape, but I agree. I thought he would go a lot sooner than this, and especially early or late in the year last year, like in December, we thought Deion Walker could be uh, like there's no way he goes past the second round, but here he
Yeah.
is.
Yeah, I think that the one thing that, he's built like that, I didn't see a ton of him just getting kind of, just pushed over, but if he is super top heavy, I hope that he plays kind of low, like his pad level is low because that's a recipe to get put on your ass a lot of times in the NFL. But, it looks like on those game grades that he had a couple rough games tackling and overall some solid pass rushing games, but also some, you know, kind of average pass rushing games and then a lot of average run games. So, kind of there's a reason he went in the fourth round. It'll definitely be a developmental thing too, where you got to get him in there and work him out and get him just developing overall. But I like the pick personally.
I do too.
He's going against good talent every week in college, so I think he'll have a good shot at working out.
Yeah, and it looks like his what's that? His sophomore year was probably a better year for him.
Yeah,
But yeah, I agree. And I'm not. I know we have PFF pulled up, but we don't let PFF completely run our thoughts and our opinions. But we like to have the stats here and the analytics to help form an opinion and validate or invalidate an opinion that we might have. But
Yeah. Yeah, and after that sophomore year, I do remember he was just getting a lot of hype as maybe even a first round guy because even right after the draft, they some people come out with way too early mock drafts and big boards and whatnot, and I
yep,
remember that he was always high on that kind of list and everything, and so maybe that's why we kind of thought that he would probably go higher and just probably had a down year this year and a lot of teams weren't as high on him.
yeah, I'd be I'd be the Bills always put a defensive lineman on the offensive line for some random or like didn't they do that or was that just another tackle that y'all always brought on?
Yeah, that was
There was
another
one game
tackle,
that
Alec
okay, yeah,
Anderson.
well there was one dude that guy was so annoying. I think it was the Broncos in the playoffs, but like
Yeah.
he was just a mauler. But I feel like Dion Walker could come on offense and do something like that too. But
Yeah, put him
um,
at fullback or something.
yeah, and I know you mentioned all the SEC guys, but y'all's next guy was actually Big Ten. I know that's a
Yep.
good little conference too, though.
Yeah, national champions. Jordan
Yeah,
Hancock, safety out of Ohio State. He's drafted in the 5th round, pick 172. I feel like you always like getting a guy that was just on a national championship team just because that they played on the biggest stage and especially if they perform in those big games, that I feel like helps draft stock and just overall confidence in a guy coming in. So I like that you get a guy that just won the Natty, got some winning in his blood, and
in his blood.
yeah, and they have a Damar Hamlin was I think he was a 5th rounder, um, so that's one thing about the Bills that I like. It seems even at times that the late round picks develop more than the early round picks. Brandon Beane has showed to be really good at picking those dudes, and then obviously McDermott and the staff develops them. But you got Matt Milano as a 5th rounder. You got
Yeah,
like I mentioned, Damar Hamlin has been solid. A lot of these guys are. Christian Benford was a 6th rounder out of Villanova. He's one of the better corners in the league. So they showed to be able to develop a lot of these guys. So I always kind of give the late round, especially defensive players, a little bit of a chance with the Bills.
anytime you get a guy from Ohio State that played with Jim Knowles and that defense and a playoff team like you mentioned, you know he can play. And here's the grade, Seamus. I know seems like a lot of different numbers here, but I'd say he's pretty good in tackling. He's had a couple missed games. Um, I don't know. What is your analysis? I'm
Yeah,
seeing not
looked like
too.
he had a rough game against Indiana, but and
Yeah,
you're gonna have some rough patches. I've said it in one of the previous videos. I think it was a Cardinals video, but whenever you have guys that are drafted in the late rounds, especially even some of the guys in the first round, there's going to be games where they struggle and don't do well in certain areas, and that's just the way football is. So um, I just think down the board you'll see, according to PFF, like a lot more reds and stuff. But I just like to see dudes that constantly improve, and you could see
that's what
from
I'm
this dude
seeing.
that first of all he stayed at Ohio State for all 4 years, um, which I think is an underrated part of it
Yeah,
because there's so many dudes that transfer out, especially if maybe you're not playing as much because you see his freshman and sophomore year, he didn't play much, but stuck it out and ended up being a starter for him. So it's like, I got to like that, some grit to him and stuff. And just looks like he had his best year of his college career this year.
absolutely. And you know, I'm a sucker for the progression too. And anytime you have a guy that stays loyal to his school, you gotta love that, right? Let that loyalty carry over, and you see Josh's loyalty to the Bills right now. I mean, he could have easily been paid more than Dak.
Yeah, Dylan, and then a little back-to-back pick right here. First offensive player that the Bills took was tight end Jackson Hawes out of Georgia Tech with the 173rd pick. And just the quick PFF analysis, the one thing that absolutely stands out when you read it is that he's the best, run blocking tight end in this class. And that's pretty huge and kind of lets you know what the Bills are going for. They proven the past 2 years, especially under Joe Brady, that they want to run the rock a lot more. And getting a tight end that is great at run blocking and almost like having an extra, you know, tackle out there that can actually maybe go out and catch a couple balls. I like it right there, and I think it's an indicator on what they wanted this draft. They wanted to build up the defense, get some young guys in on the defense, and kind of focus on the running game a little bit more.
Yeah, Seamus, that's news to me. Rated as the best run blocking tight end in the class, and to be able to get him in the fifth round, I and you could just tell, man, like the Bills are starting to want to pound the rock, and getting a guy like this gets that versatility, and who knows, he may become a mismatch, but also start to wonder if Dawson Knox could be on his way out soon. What do you think about that?
Um, yeah, I think the Bills have a lot of loyalty to Noxie, but he 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 signed a 4-year extension. I want to say 2 to maybe 3 years ago, so he might even be on a contract here this year. But I feel like he would take a little like I don't know if he would cost that much to keep. So I think this is a guy that they're gonna try to bring in and make that maybe second tight end. And we need Kincaid to develop. That's really
Yeah,
the fact of the matter. He needs to take a big step this year, I think. Um, but if he did develop to be able to take Noxie's place, then I think that would be like a perfect pick for Buffalo.
100%. Y'all's next pick was
Uh,
Dorian Strong at Virginia Tech. Um, PFF says he's great in zone, and under 50% of balls were completed on him last year. Um, dude, I know we said this in some of the other teams' draft breakdowns, but you can get these late guys late in the draft that can come in on prevent or any super um, formations with safeties like nickel or anything like that. Dorian Strong can go right in on formations like that and be an extra guy in zone on must deep third and longs or fourth and longs, even, right?
yeah, I always hold out a little hope with these late round guys just because of what I said earlier with the development that has happened in the past. But, you know, like it mentions, they run a lot of zone, and there's a reason that they bring in these cornerbacks that fit in that scheme. Maxwell Harrison, I think, profiles to be great in it, hopefully, with his speed and all that kind of good stuff. But, Dorian Strong also fits right in with that and just getting some more depth and a guy that you can hopefully develop down the line. And then
I agree.
with this next 6th round pick, 206, is tackle Chase Lunt out of Connecticut. I think I said that right, but kind of building on what we said, going in the trenches on offense, helping out the run game. You know, probably going to be a backup tackle for his whole career, but the outside chance that you hit on a guy like this, and he comes in, and there always seems to be a couple games a year where someone might go down and a backup tackle or guard has to come in and play for the Bills. So there's always a chance that he could be thrown in the fire, maybe even year one, if he, makes the team and starts developing well.
Yeah, an 88 zone run grade from PFF, Seamus. Hopefully he's coming
Yeah,
in when they need to just run the ball out, right? Run the clock out. But
yeah. I know he
uh,
played at UConn, but that's just pretty impressive. What it says, he only allowed one QB hit and no sacks last year. I
yeah,
mean, at tackle especially, that's impressive.
sounds like a good pick.
Um, yeah, and then to round it out with the 240th pick in the 7th round, They got wide receiver Caden Prather out of Maryland, and maybe he's Diggs 2.0. Diggs was a fifth round pick, but
That was the
maybe another
first thing I
Maryland
thought
guy
of.
that develops for us.
Yeah.
Um, Hopefully him and Josh don't get in bad shit together, but
Yeah, one
um,
drop from him at Maryland, dude.
yeah, yeah. It it says, despite his good size, I don't really know how big he is, but he basically didn't go up and get the ball that well, but getting a big target for Josh would be pretty huge. He might be a guy that's on the practice squad, if I had to guess, because there's a couple pretty good practice squad receivers that are always kind of looming for the Bills. I feel like Tyrell Shavers is one of them. He's always like good in camp and then just ends up not being one of the top five guys or however many they keep. But so I think this could be a guy that, sticks on the practice squad for maybe a year or two, and then hopefully he develops into someone that'll make the squad. And, another example of that is Isaiah Hodgins. He was a Bills practice squad guy, and then he ended up having like a pretty solid stretch of weeks for the Giants like 2 or 3 years ago. So maybe it's one of those type of guys where he develops into something that, Josh can throw to another weapon for him.
Sounds like another Matt Collins replacement,
Yeah,
in my opinion.
that would be
Not a
huge. I'm not.
great contested guy, but
Yeah, hopefully he's sick in the run game. That's what's so good about Matt Collins. That dude will get in there and block some people. I would just say that you know I like the draft. I like that there is a clear direction in what they wanted to do, and I felt like Brandon Bean was watching the same game that I was against the Chiefs. Shout out, me and Dylan were at that game, but
yeah.
um, it's not just that game. It's just a collection of having one of the best quarterbacks in the league in his prime and not wanting to waste that. And whenever you lose to the same team over and over and over, and it seems to be because at the end of the day, the defense is allowing that final drive or just can't stop them over the course of the game. You got to keep building to fix that because clearly we could beat all the other teams. But overall, like I said, I like you get a corner in the first round. Hopefully, he just is a dog for us because if you pair him with Christian Benford, that's huge. Um, but definitely good direction, I feel like, in this draft. And I'm fired up to watch next year.
Yeah, and PFF gives him a A minus, but Seamus, I feel like I don't know if I'm being optimistic about all these teams' drafts, but I feel like I've loved everyone that we've evaluated so far. It's hard
Yeah.
to go B plus versus A minus or whatever, right? But I like what they've done, and I think they filled their needs and gaps well.
Yeah, 100%. Like I mentioned, I like getting these dudes that played in the SEC, that played the best talent week in and week out, especially since it feels so condensed in the SEC where all the great teams haven't always been in the SEC. There's always been that top heavy amount, but when you add Texas and Oklahoma and the transfer portal into it, it just makes it to where a lot of these SEC teams are a step up and a half from a lot of the other squads, and I just like the idea of going with a lot of those guys. I really like the third and fourth round picks of Landon Jackson and Deion Walker. I'm pretty optimistic about them. So yeah, just pretty fired up overall.
Yep. Thank you guys for watching. Subscribe, like, comment if you want to see something in particular from us. And yep, go Bills.
Go Bills! Shout out Bills Mafia.